This is episode 66 of the SBP Podcast, the voice of mobile film, and I'm your host, Susie Botello. This episode is the story of Moondog Labs from the perspective of founders Julie Gerstenberger and Scott Cahall. We go to Rochester in New York to share their story with you. Their story is genuinely inspiring because from Sean Baker's Tangerine to Steven Soderbergh's High Flying Bird, it's the pioneer of anamorphic lenses for smartphone filmmakers. Today is September 10th, 2019, and Apple shared the new iPhone 11. The Apple event is always welcome for many of us who like Apple products, but more than that, it's a chance to see how the video camera is progressing in the iPhone. But whether you're going to upgrade to the new iPhone or not, one thing is for sure. If you're a good storyteller, you don't need the latest model of a smartphone to turn your story into a great film. Feature or short, a great film with a great story will live on in the people who experience them forever. So make your film and share it with the world. Oh, and by the way, we're still open for film submissions at the International Mobile Film Festival in San Diego. We accept shorts and feature-length films. So go to our website, internationalmobilefilmfestival.com, to get the details and the deadlines. But let me not waste any more of your time, and let's go to New York and talk with our guests at Moondog Labs. Everybody, welcome to the SBP Podcast. I have two wonderful people with me. They're actually in New York, and I'd like to introduce them both to you. Now, if you use or if you dream about making movies with your phone, you may have heard of them. They are Moondog Labs. Moondog Labs is in Rochester in New York. And I have here the two founders of that, Julie Gerstenberger and Scott Cahall. Hi, guys.
Hi, great to be with you.
Glad that you're on the show. I know that this is a real treat for our listeners. Usually you have the people who are making the films and people who are in front of the camera. But it's really nice to get your perspective in this and to share a little bit about your lenses because you guys are pioneers, aren't you?
That's right. We were very early, the first ones out into the mobile filmmaking space that were really focused on filmmaking, more so than photography.
If you don't mind me asking a little bit, what I would like to share with our listeners, first of all, is a little bit about why Moondog Labs has such a wonderful reputation and a little bit about what anamorphic lenses do for a mobile filmmaker. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about how you guys started your company, because I think your backstory is pretty interesting, especially with some of the earlier feature films that were shot on the iPhone that really elevated mobile filmmaking, I should say, into our world, right?
Mm-hmm. Great. I'll let Scott jump in here because he's got the start of the story.
Okay.
Sure. So I'm not quite sure where to start. Let's see. So we started the company, Julie and I did, in 2013. Our backgrounds are really from primarily from Eastman Kodak, where we both worked as optical engineers and designers. I had started a consulting company about a dozen years ago and grew that to a handful of designers, primarily people that I worked with at Kodak. And we did that for about 5 or 6 years, and then basically came to the conclusion that we wanted to do some projects and some products of our own. So I gave Julie a call, who I had known from Kodak, and pitched a couple of ideas to her. She has quite an interesting background that I can let her talk about in a bit here. But in the end, we settled on doing something. We know we wanted to do something unique, and we were both quite interested in filmmaking in general, primarily because of our background at Kodak. And I had been seeing a lot of interest in anamorphics for DSLRs, and it was kind of an interesting kind of dynamic time back 6 or so years ago in the development space for that. And we had done, my design group had done design work for mobile phones for quite a few years prior to that. So we had a really good feeling for what's inside of the phone, the camera that's inside of your phone. So we felt pretty uniquely qualified to design lenses that attach on the outside that would work well with phones. And it was really the combination of seeing this pretty active interest in anamorphics in general at the time, as well as our what we felt was pretty uniquely qualified backgrounds in mobile, that kind of led us down this path of trying to do something anamorphic for your mobile device. And
I have a quick question, just
Sure.
for some of our listeners who may not realize what anamorphics are.
Sure. So a typical phone, if you're shooting in video mode, will have a 16:9 aspect ratio. What an anamorphic does is it will expand the camera's field of view, but it only does so in the horizontal direction, which is kind of unique. So a typical wide-angle adapter would expand it in both the vertical and horizontal direction, but you still, at the end of the day, have the same aspect ratio. With an anamorphic, it really effectively expands your field of view in the horizontal direction to increase your aspect ratio from, for example, 16:9 to something like 2.4 to 1. So it really gives a much wider feel to your footage. And this is something that you see pretty often in feature films, but it's not something that you can readily do, or at least you couldn't at the time, with your mobile device. Your only option at the time was to capture in 16:9 and simply crop the top and bottom of your image. So this was sort of a new way in the mobile space to give your footage a really high-end cinematic look.
And you also mentioned that you were working with mobile phone camera technology or something earlier?
Yes.
What was that about?
Well, so I can't talk about a lot of that, but since my time at Kodak, which was now over a dozen years ago, I and others here have been designing the prime lenses that are inside of your phone. So if you watch various for example, an Apple event, sometimes they'll show sort of a cartoon image of the lens stack that's inside of the phone. Those are the kinds of things that we've done a lot of work on. So those are typically all plastic designs, and there may be 6 or so lens elements, 6 or 7 elements in there, and they're really very complex designs. I'm not sure that that probably most of the world appreciates how challenging those can be, but we've done a lot of that work over the past dozen or so years.
Wow, that's interesting. And Julie, how did you decide? I guess I kind of wonder also what brought you guys together. I'm imagining that at Kodak there were probably quite a big number of people working there. But what specifically made you guys make that connection and go off in your own venture, basically?
Sure. So I think that Scott and I did work together in the same division, in the optical products division at Kodak, which was a central product development organization working on cameras and motion picture cinema and blood analyzers, a wide range of products. And I had moved from that area into the corporate venture group at Kodak, and then was running a corporate engineering division that did a lot of early stage product development. And I think, Scott mentioned reaching out to me after he had started his design firm. I think, we always felt like we had very complementary skill sets. We both came from a technical background, but I had moved more into the venture and early stage technology development and commercialization business side of things. And Scott is a born entrepreneur. He's got more ideas in any given day for new products and new businesses. And I think, I complement that strength that he has with business insight and, how you can turn those ideas into a business and manage the operations there. So that's really where we came in and came together to start Moondog Labs.
That's so great. And that was back in 2014 or 15?
In 2013.
13. Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because things, when they get started, they usually take a year at least, right, to get it moving forward while you're planning.
Right. And we had done a number of sort of conceptual development exercises. And it was really 2013 where we created the company, as Scott said earlier, really honed in on this idea of a mobile anamorphic and prepared and launched that on Kickstarter. So that was really the start of it, with a fair amount of work going in ahead of that time.
You guys have some movies. I know that when most of our listeners or anybody on the street anymore, I know when I first started this, I would tell people about making movies on their phones, and they would stop and say, "Oh, that's an interesting idea." Nowadays, when I bring it up to people, they don't say that anymore. They've heard about it, and the first movie that comes up, guess what it is?
I would assume it's Tangerine.
Yes.
Yes. Yep. Tangerine was really the film that really gave credibility to mobile filmmaking, because prior to that, it was, as you said, it was a novelty. People did it, and films tended to get a lot of attention because they were mobile films. And Tangerine got a lot of attention because it was just a good film. And oh, by the way, it was shot on an iPhone.
Yeah, did you guys hear from, that was shot with a 5S, am I right?
That's right.
Oh, that's good, because that's what I've been telling people. When Sean Baker made that film, did he get in touch with you guys, or did you guys already have the lens and offer it to him? Or, well, you wouldn't have known about him at the time, but how did that work out?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting story. I'll start it, Julie. Maybe you can finish it.
Yeah.
It's quite funny because we had just launched our Kickstarter, and we had probably, I think it was maybe 3 prototypes of our lens. It was very few at the time, and Sean reached out to us and basically pitched his film to us. I mean, he said, I'm shooting this film. We're starting in a few weeks. It's in LA, and he dropped some names that we somehow didn't know at the time because we weren't really in that space so much. The Duplass brothers, for example, who we should have known, and said, I'm going to be shooting this on a phone, but I really would like to have a very unique look for the film, and your anamorphics sound perfect. Is there any way you can send some to us? And, we sort of, looked down at what we had had on the bench, and it was 3 lenses. So, we sent him, I think, 2 of those lenses at the time, because it sounded like an interesting project, even though we didn't know a whole lot about it. And then that was it for a long time, right, Julie?
Right. So our Kickstarter started in November of 2013. Sean reached out to us very quickly during our Kickstarter. We sent him 2 of our lenses, and then he shot Tangerine over during the holiday period. If you've seen it, it takes place, at Christmas time, and in 2018. Excuse me. And then really didn't hear from him till about August of the following year. I would periodically kind of reach out and, hey, Sean, how's it going? And didn't really hear much back. And then about August, he responded and said, hey, really excited. I'm finishing up post-production and we're submitting to Sundance, and think that it's very likely that will be accepted. So, and they were, and the film was very, very well received, got a distribution deal at Sundance. Scott and I were there at the premiere, and it was just fabulous to sit through the film. And then the very last credit on the screen was our logo, and the fact that the film was shot on iPhone 5. And there was an audible gasp in the theater when people realized that the film that they just had seen was shot on iPhone, because the production value was very good.
Wow. And you had already finished your Kickstarter and everything by that time?
Yes, we had started shipping. So our Kickstarter finished in December of 2013, and we had started shipping lenses at the end of April in 2019. So we'd been shipping lenses for a number of months before we heard back from Sean, and then of course the Sundance premiere was in January of 2015.
Yeah.
So we'd been shipping lenses for months before Sundance and that premiere, where the whole mobile anamorphic just got really a lot more attention.
Well, yeah, that was great publicity for you guys, just as you were starting, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was terrific. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sean, Sean's been really great. I mean, he does a tremendous job of obviously promoting his films, but also he's very gracious at mentioning Moondog Labs at every turn, it seems. So we're really appreciative of that.
Yeah. Right after that, I believe we were getting ready to do the 2016 Film Festival, or maybe it was 2015. I can't remember, because we do it in April, so I think it was 2016. And we had a call from Movie Maker magazine. Mm-hmm. And they did a cover story on smartphone filmmaking. And I think it mentioned you guys, it mentioned Sean and the Tangerine film, and then it mentioned a few of our mobile film festivals, the pioneering ones, as I call us, and some of the filmmakers as well, that were already, making bunches, I should say, of short films mainly. But yeah, that really kicked everything off. And then since then everybody seemed to want to give that a shot, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Now there are all these, getting an anamorphic lenses, right? There's more than one now, but yours has the, I would say, prestige of having you guys who have this background with Kodak. And I mean, Kodak is, they're the first with film, right, Scott?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we really Kodak is the one that brought it to the masses, and really sort of enabled the world to take up photography in an affordable way.
And what made you guys? Because you have to. The one thing that I kind of believe in, at least personally, is that passion is really detrimental to the success of any project, especially if it's gonna last, right? And for you guys, are you passionate about, is it storytelling, filmmaking in general, mobile film? Because this especially back then wasn't something that, it's not like a pizza restaurant, right?
Yeah, I think for us, I'll say for me in particular, and Julie, you can talk about yourself, but one of the things that I really enjoy and have enjoyed for a long, long time is the creative process of optical design. And I think that for me, I feel on some level a connection to filmmakers out there who also have their own creative process to sort of create something new. And I think anything that I can do and that we can do to sort of use our, obviously some of our creativity, but our technical skills, whatever we can to enable these other creatives is a really incredibly gratifying thing for us. So it's really one of the things that drives us. And to be able to do that for sort of in a way that's more approachable and more affordable, I think for a larger community out there, is sort of icing on the cake. It feels really good, and so it's really in our DNA as a company.
I would echo that too. I think that what I find really exciting, more specifically, it's exactly in the same vein that Scott was just describing, but is the challenge of really taking what we know, which is imaging and optics specifically, and translating what filmmakers and photographers want from the creative side of what they're doing and the stories that they want to tell, which is just a different way of saying what Scott said. But, to talk to filmmakers and, they talk about the look that they're after. And, we'll use words like, creamy. And, so as technical people then to say, well, what do we need to do with a lens that will give them that look that they're after? That's, the most fun challenge that we could possibly have.
Yeah, because you're turning a vision, literally a visual vision, right, into a reality for us.
Exactly.
You're saying creamy, and I kind of laughed a little bit because it reminds me of the people making fun of the shampoo commercials. But there's a smooth look to, I don't have your lenses, but there's a smooth look to the cinematic films. And most people talk about that with, the number of frames that are used, 24 frames per second or 25, and versus 30 or 60 or something like that. But would you guys mind, or maybe this is a Scott question, clarifying that a little bit with why it's not just frame rate, but also the lenses, the anamorphic lens that can really bring the quality of cinematic value or cinematic look to your film?
Well, I think one of the things that a lot of filmmakers talk about is the sort of pluses and minuses of modern digital imaging. Modern digital cameras, even in your phone, are really quite excellent these days. But they're almost excellent to the point where they're boring, where they're somewhat sterile, and it's really hard to get much differentiation between two pieces shot on the same camera. And in the case of phones, there are many, many millions of people out there with phones who are shooting videos, And to get something that looks different and that looks, quote, cinematic, which is, my cinematic, people typically are referring to what they've seen shot on film. You have to do something different. And some people refer to lenses as the sort of the new emulsion. I mean, in the past, you could change the film stock to get a different look. Now, you can change a lens to get a different look, and that's, I mean, you could do that before, of course, but it's become sort of one of the more primary levers now, I would say, than I mean, you don't swap out a sensor in your camera, but you can swap out a lens. So I think we sort of as lens designers sort of took on that responsibility and try to give something that looks and feels unique and that is reminiscent of something that was shot on film, just because that in this day and age is somewhat unique. So and it's not always easy, like Julie was referring to. It's you have descriptors from filmmakers that don't directly translate to design specifications. You have to sort of do that conversion in your head and think about what that means from for aberrations or coatings or whatever else, vignetting, all these things, and sort of piece together what that means in a design and use that to create something that hopefully satisfies them. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that, but it was not an easy path. I mean, it took a few iterations, and we worked with filmmakers, and I think we ended up with something that people enjoy.
One of the really cool aspects about mobile filmmaking, one of the things that I enjoy about it is the fact that it appeals to the established filmmaker. I mean, you've got Steven Soderbergh and people like that already, all over this. But it appeals to them as a challenge mainly, and it also appeals to people who have never picked up even a real camera before. And not to say that the smartphone is not a real camera when you're using it as a camera, but it's a phone, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you were just, when you were just talking about how people are saying creamy and for the look and things like that, so you're getting a variety of different descriptions and questions where you've got filmmakers who are established, who know the terminology, and they're able to describe and communicate something using the terms. And then you have people who know nothing about filmmaking, and then trying to describe, and communicate that with you guys. What's really cool is that with your lenses, and a lot of these products, I mean, if there's a filmmaker in our film festival 2 years in a row, probably going on 3 now. She's 84 years old now. And it's amazing. And then we've had, children also. There's somebody in my family who just turned 5 last April, who is a little vlogger, to say to people from both extremes, hey, you can pick up your phone and just turn it sideways. I always like to do that. And hit record, and don't worry about the technicalities right now. Just start doing it, and you can do all that later. To say to them, also pick up these lenses from Moondog Labs, and it'll give your phone, your film, I should say, that extra look without really complicating it, because they don't need to know everything that Scott just said, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, one of the things we almost all, and many folks in their 80s, which is fabulous, have this smartphone in our pocket, which has an extremely capable camera. And when we can offer something that used to be a very, very high-end cinematography tool for a very affordable price point, people can take it and they can experiment. And you alluded to it. The most critical thing is to start shooting and to really learn what works and, start to refine your look and start to, think about the story that you're telling. And so being able to give people that tool, they don't necessarily have to know the whole history of anamorphic shooting, but they can start to shoot with it and say, this is how, these landscape shots look, this is how some indoor shots look with, a lot of action, and really start to play with it and develop their own language.
Yeah, I would say it also does free up the traditional filmmaker from having to pay too much attention to the details, right? All the settings and too much of that, and concentrate a little more on the story part, right?
Right, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, like you said, there are two, sort of two general classes of people who are shooting on phones. There's a group that, they're just starting out, or it's all they can afford. And then there's this group of, really, very high-end Hollywood professionals who are also doing this. And, why are they doing it? Well, I think they enjoy it. They like the challenge of it. But I think, in some cases it brings them, sort of back to a, simpler times when they didn't have to have a whole crew to shoot something.
Yeah, I've had one of the sponsors for our film festival here in San Diego is also a filmmaker, and he started out when he was, I think he said he was 11 or 8 or something like that I think he was 12, and where I'm picturing the 8 is from the 8mm camera, which is how he started out. And wanted to mention, Blue Moon, right? Steph Harris, who was in that same game.
Yeah. He surely did an amazing thing with Blue Moon.
How did that? Because I just have, I idolize these guys. I love the fact that they made that film, but I also love the fact that they're so willing to connect with the mobile filmmaking community. Because I know that they will jump into the conversation. They're willing to actually, just interact with everybody more than any of the other filmmakers. And they don't call themselves Hollywood actors or filmmakers, but they're just right there on that edge, right?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think they're total professionals, right? And they're top-notch actors, and they've been in some large budget features, but this was, I think, I mean, obviously you've spoken with them, but I mean, I think this for them was kind of it was an interesting story for one, that Steph wrote, and I think it was one of those things that I think lended itself well to a pretty short shoot, and what they did in pretty short order putting this together is quite incredible, and yeah, it happened to be shot on a phone.
Yeah, and one of the things that I know for Ryan, I think it was the first time he shot a feature film, period. So for him to be willing to run, go from making shorts to feature films using that, I think part of the confidence that they had was also because they did some test shoots, and they used your lenses for that, and they saw that, oh my God, look at what this can do. Do you have anything to add to, because I wanted to talk about your products, but do you have anything to add about the actual the filmmaking aspect of this for you guys?
I guess the only other thing I would add, you've touched on a number of the benefits of mobile filmmaking, and really, from people who have very little experience to people who, have been honing their craft in Hollywood for decades. But I think the other thing that people really talk about, and Blue Moon is a good example of this, is mobile can also just make a film much more accessible, right? You can shoot with a mobile phone in a way and with a cast that's much less intimidating. And it's also, we can think of projects where people have just had lots of fun with things you could only shoot with a small camera, sticking the camera inside a wine glass or, doing just goofy, crazy shots that you just can only do with
sneaking it into Disney World.
What's that?
Or sneaking it into Disney World.
Right. Or on a bus and,
right.
Everybody doesn't realize you're shooting, a major film because you're just another person running around with your phone in front of your face.
I think that's something that's really appealing to, because I don't want to forget. So there's the Hollywood filmmakers, there's the complete novice who has no experience in this. And then there's the middle ground people, which are the independent filmmakers. Right.
Right.
And a lot of them, they're sort of in the middle. So they've got these wonderful films, but a lot of them get involved with guerrilla filmmaking. And for them, this really opens up that platform for them, where I think
right.
for them, they're probably thinking about it and doing it more, which is, I think there are more independent filmmakers, traditional independent filmmakers making mobile films than Hollywood filmmakers. But I see these three lines, like a tripod, right? Sort of coming together in the future. What do you guys think about the future of mobile filmmaking?
I think it will continue to grow. I think that people are very comfortable with the fact that mobile films can be very professional films and can get distribution, and it's not gimmicky. I think that it's increasingly seen as another tool. So, you've got the action cameras, you've got, a wide range of cinema cameras from digital SLRs all the way up to, the thousands of dollars. And people are comfortable mixing those on a shoot. So it's just become part of the spectrum of what people have access to.
Do you guys see, the biggest thing, because you guys are, if I'm going to take advantage of this discussion, I might as well do it now. Basically, you guys know about the optics of all this stuff, but what would you say would be the future of, the depth of field with the small lenses? I believe in magic in that sense, right? Like if enough people for a long enough time, after so many successes, right? So many points down the line that they're reaching, there's going to become a point where you can have a small lens reach that depth of field. I believe that. What do you guys think about this belief?
Well, so I disagree in the physics sense.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of tricks out there that people are doing with computational imaging, where you can have, typically it's done with multiple cameras, and you can effectively mimic that look. So it may be 2 or 3 or more cameras that all have tiny sensors, but those cameras are spaced apart on your phone. And you can effectively create a large synthetic aperture to mimic a larger format sensor and a larger format lens. You see Apple doing this, and you see many other companies doing this. You see, there's a company called Light, you may have heard of, that is doing this. So the technology is there. It's really fairly computationally intensive now. So you see it primarily in photography more than filmmaking, but I think that's the direction it's going and will go, and then sort of the line gets blurred even further, so to speak, between these sort of ultra compact devices that have an array of cameras in them, and then one that's physically much larger. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing that's going on right now. It's a very dynamic time for computational imaging. So it'll be interesting to see what Apple does here shortly with their newest phones coming out, and of course the rest of the industry. They're not the only ones doing this.
You have anything to say about that, Julie?
Just that I absolutely agree. I think that the physics, as Scott described, of the cameras are going to have some limitations, and we've already seen mobile phones going to these multi-camera systems and doing things computationally, and that's really, from a physics perspective, the only way to get some of these effects in the sort of form factor that is acceptable in a mobile phone.
Wow, that's awesome to hear, though, because in the end, what matters the most is that look, regardless of how you achieve it, right?
Right.
Sure.
That's amazing. So what is the future? Before we talk about your products, because I really want to talk about them, but really quick, what is the future of Moondog Labs? I know you guys are, you also have products for different cameras, not just smartphones. Smartphones was the first one, right?
Yes, absolutely, for us. I mean, I don't know, Julie, do you want to take this? Or
Sure. So you've probably seen some of our recent products launched to attach our anamorphic lenses to action cameras, specifically the Sony RX0. Based on feedback from our customers, we're always listening. And, we heard, as we were both just talking about a few minutes ago, that people really want options across a range of camera platforms. So that's definitely a direction where we're headed, to support a wider range of cameras beyond just mobile phones.
That's really good. I myself personally, I become loyal to a particular company. Once I like a company, I just want them to make everything for me, so I don't have to go to another company. So that's good. I think that you guys are doing that because of the other thing of what you just said, which is that people are using multiple devices for one particular story or film, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I want to talk about I want you actually to talk about your products. So you have the anamorphic lenses for the iPhones, but they're also do they work also for Android phones or just for iPhones?
Do you want to talk about this?
Sure. Yeah. So we have really what it comes down to is the mounting system. So from an optical perspective, they certainly work on iPhones and Androids. We have some that are dedicated to particular models of iPhones. Those are sort of the where we started, and those are the kind of easiest and simplest to use. And then we have a series of options for people to use dedicated cases. So you can have one lens and use it on multiple phones. Those are typically for iPhones. And then we have another version of our lens that has a larger 37 millimeter thread on the back. And there are a range of rigs out there that people can basically pop any phone they want into and then attach our lens to it.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And so you have the lenses, and then you also have. So when someone buys, let's say, I have two. I have the XR, which is my phone, but then I have the 6S, which I use when I really want to get down with with making videos. And let's say for those two phones, you can buy the anamorphic lens for each one of those phones. Does it come with mounting systems or not?
So for the 6S, we have a lens that is dedicated to that phone, and it essentially clamps over the edge of the phone. So that's sort of a all-in-one contained system that clamps on securely, and you can just go out and start filming. For the 10S or 10R you said.
Yeah.
For the 10R, it's we don't have one that clamps on because ever since Apple filled the entire back side of the phone or front side of the phone with a screen, we didn't want to cover any of the screen, so we have a case that goes onto the phone, and you would basically attach the lens to the case. So those are two options for those particular devices. You could also take either of those and put it in a rig with a 37 millimeter adapter, screw our lens on, and use it with either one of those, the same lens.
But then you go filming and you really get a lot of good attention with that, right?
Yeah, well, it's certainly more noticeable when you have a rig, a full rig. Even a mobile rig is more noticeable than just having a phone by itself. So it's noticed. I mean, that's if you look at any of the behind the scenes footage from High Flying Bird with the Steven Soderbergh's film, that's very there's some very clear shots where he's holding a rig that has one of our lenses mounted on it.
Yeah, and with the stabilizers, and I know that you guys work with those as well.
Yeah.
You have, so when you're using a gimbal, also you guys have the counterweights. Had I not seen that on your website, I wouldn't have even realized that. Oh my gosh, that's right. You might need that if you're attaching lens, right?
Yeah, most of the gimbals out there are flexible in some ways, but they weren't originally designed to accommodate a lens. And that really throws things off. And depending on the phone, it may throw it off to the point where it really just won't work. So we designed a series of counterweights to really offset the addition of our lens or our lens plus a filter, and those have been quite helpful for filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you would like to share with our filmmakers that's coming up, that's not top secret or anything with your company? Any particular product that we should let them know to look for?
I think we can give you a sneak peek. We have, so in the next few days, we will be releasing a way, we'll just generally call it a way for people to attach our Anamorphic to GoPro Hero 7. So there are some sort of caveats to that, but it's I think for those who have a Hero 7 and already have our lens, I think it may be kind of an interesting option. So we're excited about that. We'll be releasing that within the next week or so.
Oh, good. So it'll be ready before Christmas.
Oh, yes.
That sounds good. What would be one message, unless you'd like to bring up any other products or anything?
I think that's probably enough of a peek into the future. We've got lots of other things we're working on, but we have to be a little bit cagey.
Okay, good. Okay, one question for our listeners, because what you guys are doing, we take it for granted. I do presentations all the time, and I keep telling people not to go too deep into all the gear and all the settings and all that. You just grab their phone and just pick it up and start shooting. But I always say, and people forget, you do concentrate on the story. The first thing you really need is a story, because that's your motivation to start shooting. Mm-hmm. But it's almost like I feel guilty now, because it's almost like, it's great to have a story, but if you're going to make a film, you need the camera. And if you have a camera, you do want your story to be as epic as the story itself. You want that film to look great, Mm-hmm. So what you guys have done is, without a camera, really, going back to your days in Kodak and everything, without a camera, we wouldn't be able to share stories through film, which is the best way to share a story. And I say share because there's a combination of creating that story right into a film, and then now with the internet to be able to share it with the most people all over the world. But what would be one message that you could give? And I'll start with Julie, and then Scott, you can say, from your perspective, what message would you give to all the mobile filmmakers that are listening to this right now?
So I guess if I'm going to start with one thing, it would be, and just jumping off what you described, absolutely start with a story, but also, get out and experiment with your tools, because that will help you refine the story, and think about, how to shoot and how to express this story that you're trying to tell. I think, we can all think of, particularly shorts, which is the great place to start, that we've seen where it's interesting, but it doesn't have a compelling message and story. You can tell that the crew and the cast had lots of fun doing it, and they might have some little clever thing in there, but it's unsatisfying. And so getting that combination of the technical platform to tell the story, so developing those competencies really complements and enables the telling of the story, because you don't want to end up with a sort of a cute technical trick and no story, but you also don't want a story that is undermined by poor execution and poor production value. So balancing those two things, I think, would be my advice.
What she said. I think, but I'll just add to that. I would, in civil terms, I would say just don't be afraid to fail. And I think everybody's a newbie when they start out, and there's a whole lot to learn, and there's a whole lot of mistakes to be made along the way. So the sooner you can just start doing things, the sooner you can hopefully, knock out all those mistakes and get to the good stuff. But you don't get there instantly. You get there by trying and failing a bunch of times. And why not do that in the sort of the easiest and most economical way, which I would argue would be on a phone.
That's awesome. I agree with you, Julie. I think a story, you do have to be sort of mindful, if that's even a word, of the message behind the story, and take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys, we've actually talked for an hour, believe it or not. I can't thank you enough for being a part of this and taking the time to do this, especially on your time zone right now. I'm really looking forward. I hope that you guys, if you're ever in San Diego, I hope it happens to be during the last weekend of April. So you can come and be a part of our film festival. The other last little thing that I just want to say to you is that that the entire filmmaking community, from what I can see on social media and from what I've heard personally, admires the work that you do. And your lenses are, proof of the hard work that you guys do and put behind it, your expertise with Kodak and everything you've done. That's admirable. So on behalf of the mobile filmmaking community, I just want to say thank you to both of you, Scott and Julie.
Well, thank you so much. That's great to hear.
Yeah, that's what makes our jobs really satisfying. So thank you.
You're welcome. All right, listeners. Well, I should say, Scott and Julie, say goodbye to our listeners.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now.